morning, friends. It's Jim McCarthy with American Vapor Manufacturers here for another installment of Shaping Vaping, our podcast on nicotine THR policy. And as ever, we're joined by the inimitable intellectual Joe Gitchell from Pinion Associates. Good morning, Joe.
Hello, Jim. I'm going to resist intellectual as a characterization. And if I knew what inimitable really meant, I'd probably push back on that too.
We'll use lowercase i's for both of those. That was music from one of the great Irish bands of all time, the Pogues, singing "I Fought the Law," which is apropos because it sure does seem like that's what we're doing across the board. Today on the show, we want to talk about the e-cig summit that you, Joe, just attended in the United Kingdom. We'll also talk a little bit about the fallout and implications of the recent FCTC COP. And then I want to touch a little bit also on some media that's been going on. There was an interesting kind of rowback article that appeared in National Public Radio that got some attention. And there was also the head of NIH, Dr. Bhattacharya, took a pretty big haymaker swing at a bête noire of mine, the New York Times. And I want to touch on that also. But before I do that, I want to just pull up once again an important, jeepers. Where is it? Here it is. An important survey that popped just a week or so ago. And it is from a polling firm called Fabrizio Ward. We might have mentioned this before, but the point is, this is a national survey. Fabrizio Ward is President Trump's primary polling agency. And what that means is they put out surveys to the public, not only to get a sense of what Americans are thinking, but also what messages are going to resonate with them the most. When Republicans are on the campaign trail in the upcoming midterms, for example, Fabrizio Ward tries to figure out what is going to resonate the most, what's going to get people to the voting booth and especially to vote for Republican candidates. And so here's a survey they did just completely on the administration's vape crackdown. And notice the takeaway. The survey is clear. Keep up the enforcement activity and do more of it. And so the reason I point this out, Joe, is because it's now apparent, I think, undoubtedly, beyond question, that both major political parties in this country are now forcefully dedicated to a, all-out crackdown hostility toward nicotine vaping in policy, in enforcement, in rhetoric, even in electoral politics. And so, if we thought it was bad under the Biden administration, which it undoubtedly was, we've now got two 800-pound political gorillas confronting us. And it's dark. And it was in that, in that bleak horizon that the e-cig summit took place in the UK, which you attended. I'll make my complaint brief.
Well,
Memo to conference organizers, for the love of Christmas and everything decent, will you please put up some content from these things so they're not happening in a cloistered bubble? You can do it with highlights. You can do snippets. You can even do on demand or monetize it as you wish, but please turn on the lights. Here's the only content I've got from the entire conference, which is a screen grab of an iPhone picture from sideways row of the conference. I don't even know who the speaker is.
I can help with that. That's Carl Erik Lund from Norway.
Carl Erik Lund, God bless him, is pointing out what's happening in the country of Norway here. And if you'll notice, among men on the left and women on the right, the use of combustible tobacco cigarettes accelerates downward sharply with the rise of snus in that country for both men and women. And I guess why don't I just hand the ball to you, Skip, with Joe, with the question. Explain to us why is that important? Why is that chart important? And then we'll talk more about what happened at the conference more that you saw.
You bet. And I'll drop another paper in too, to get back to your opening point about the political bipartisan agreement that sometimes we seek as a positive thing.
Yeah, hooray! We're reaching across the aisle. Great.
But let me start with your specific question. So I actually had to miss Carl Eric's talk, but I rewatched it this morning. It's excellent. One of his main points is essentially that once nicotine has been introduced into a culture, it only gets replaced with other forms of nicotine delivery. So he gave the history of Norway, which used oral tobacco in the early, from early times into the early 20th century. And then it shifted to, different forms over time. But essentially, you just saw swapping and some growth, not any overall decline. So here he's making the point, and these are ecological comparisons. They're vulnerable to lots of other things going on. But one way to interpret this is that snus is substituting for cigarettes. And that's Carl Eric's belief in terms of what's happening in Norway and the Nordics.
What's another interpretation?
Because it could be that what we're interpreting in this is it's the same people who used to smoke but are now switching to snus. It's entirely possible that there are people who are leaving cigarettes, but new people are joining and consuming snus. So that's you need different data sources to be able. This is daily use prevalence. So, it's not just consumption or sales, but it still leaves open that interpretation. And I do want to go back to this bipartisan point. Publication, and I am not a unbiased judger of this paper, as the first author is my bride.
All right.
So I think it's excellent.
That actually gives credibility for me.
But drop it into the chat. And what we show very clearly, or what they show very clearly, is that there's a strong correlation between concern about the risk of e-cigarettes, relative risk compared to tobacco products, and support for policies that restrict their use. So not, an intuitively obvious.
Can you say that? Give me that in layman's terms. Give me the C- version for those of us in the back.
That if people believe that e-cigarettes are essentially as harmful as cigarettes,
right,
then they support policies that restrict their availability and use, just like they do for cigarettes.
Okay, right.
And so what we have is widespread agreement and understanding that vaping and other non-combustible products are not really any different in terms of their harmfulness compared to cigarettes. And it's really hard to forge a path to different policy when the body politic has come to a very strong conclusion.
Can I give you my cynical interpretation that you tell me if you think this is off base or outside the lines? It sure does look to me like the very same entities that are responsible for that increasing misperception are now not only not clearing it up and not shooting straight with the public about it, but instead are taking political advantage now by using those misperceptions to drive people to vote for their candidates.
I'm not sure that that's only cynical. I think that's sadly reasonable. But I think there is a long-term consequence, and it's unfortunate that that we have to rely upon those things and that trust from the public is going to be yet further eroded in these institutions based on that behavior.
Well, yeah, and I can't help noticing these are all what I would call macro incentives that are combining here. So there's an ideological incentive to drive hostility toward nicotine. We see that manifest on both the left and the right. At the primary agency here that regulates these products, the Food and Drug Administration, there's an economic incentive because they get 100% of their budget from combustible tobacco. The Center for Tobacco Products does. And then number three, there's a political incentive because they have, when they mislead people about these products and deceive them into thinking they're more dangerous than cigarettes, they can then take electoral advantage and drive voters to their candidates in order to crack down on a product that they have misled the public about. So those are three huge drivers that are, that are motivating the policy. I mean, it's absolutely appalling.
It highlights the challenge that we confront because those are all really potent drivers.
Yeah, well, I mean, it gets back. I'll throw out a little, I don't know, ray of good light, or light a candle in the darkness here, which is my recent mantra, which is tobacco harm reduction is civil disobedience. We all have a right to save our own lives and access these products and control what's happening with our own bodies. And you know what? All of the people I just named before can go jump in a ding-dang lake at the end of the day, because I'm going to continue doing it, and I hope my fellow Americans do the same thing. I want to put up here, a comment just apropos here from the, what's his title? Director of NIH, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, successor to your friend Francis Collins, folk singer extraordinaire. Sorry, not sorry. And he points out, interestingly here, he says, a reminder he put on Twitter last week, empirical evidence shows lockdowns fail to protect life and cause tremendous catastrophic harm, talking about COVID. And he's pointing at the New York Times in particular. He says, let's hope the New York Times never again has a say in public health policy. And you know what? To that, I say, amen, preach, and rain down the brimstone on them. But you know what immediately jumped to mind after that, Joe, is, well, hell's bells. The New York Times has been absolutely trashing nicotine vaping for years. Irresponsible, inaccurate, deceitful, manifestly harmful coverage, impervious to criticism or accountability. They've been doing the exact same thing, not sort of, kind of, exactly. And I'd even argue, you know what, Joe, you want to talk about the human scale, since Dr. Bhattacharya brings it up, the tremendous catastrophic harm he talks about. I'll throw it out there. You tell me, which has cost more lives in this country in the last 10 years, the New York Times and their pals' misguided solutions to COVID policy, or the New York Times and their misguided pals in the way they've approached nicotine policy?
It's a question I'm not able to answer.
I'll give you some hints. Each year in this country, as we know, 400,000 plus people die from smoking-related illness and disease. I mean, times 10 is, I don't even know what the math on that is. Is that
4 million?
4
million plus.
4 million plus people. I don't know how many people died as a result of COVID mismanagement over what it otherwise would have been, but I don't think it's that many.
No, I mean,
I'll give you one more stat just to loop back on what we're talking about from the ESIG Summit, which is Clive Bates posted this stat on how the European Union banned snus in 1992. Guess how many Europeans have died from smoking-related disease since that time? 20 million.
So I actually think that estimate is not just how many total have died from smoking, but what is the estimate of lives saved if the rest of the EU had followed Sweden's
Yeah.
pattern. So that's actually exactly the comparison that you're seeking here. And I was funny as earlier this morning, I was thinking about like, okay, what are these fundamental differences between me and Jim? And you want you you want the New York Times to never have a place of influence over policy, and I still want them to be have some influence and say. I just want it not to suck, and that's I think different. I don't have time to get clever and smart on as many things as we face in a modern society, and I rely upon knowledge curators to keep me informed about things that matter. So I need sources of news and analysis that I can trust, and it is deeply disturbing that lots of places get the one thing I can claim some measure of expertise on wrong. And it does make me then have no choice but to question their judgment on other domains. It's very discomforting. But my resulting leaning is still not to say, well, pox on their house, let's burn it down and just rely upon the vox populi or whatever the fancy Latin, whatever, blah, blah thing. But how do they go back to the Jonathan Rauch reliable knowledge generation approaches that then they can earn back some trust?
Well, let me ask you something. Let me press on that a little bit, Joe. They're not the only news outlet out there. Why does it have to be the New York Times? Why don't you rely on, I don't know, let's say Breitbart News, or why don't you rely on InfoWars, or why don't you rely on, I mean, surely there are news outlets that you look at and have read before and have come to the conclusion these people are unreliable, they're pushing an agenda, they're not trustworthy, and I'm not going to give them my time and attention or rely on them for my guidance. I mean, I'm sure. Surely, I mean, I bet when was the last time you spent an hour watching Fox News? I bet perhaps never.
Perhaps never.
Why is that?
Because I'm a pompous left-leaning bubbler.
I don't begrudge you. You can come to your own conclusions about Fox News, but the point I'm making is we can make judgments about these news outlets and say, look, I've interacted with it, I've absorbed what they're reporting. I think it's biased or untrustworthy or erroneous or flawed, and therefore unreliable, and therefore disqualified from my news diet, and also ought to be DQ'd from influencing public policy. I'm sure you'd be horrified to imagine that, as they do. I mean, Fox, the new U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, for example, was plucked out of a Fox News set. I imagine that might trouble you, doesn't it?
Well, I don't think that's dispositive on her capability to serve in that role. I'd like to think there were other considerations.
Am I safe in assuming that if you don't trust Fox News for your news diet, you don't want them having an influence on national policy either? Is that too much?
So I'm more of, and I know you're trying to take me on a voyage of discovery here, but I want lots of voices to have a place in this discussion and not have voices be censored or exiled. I think that's really tricky. So, and problematic, like it's lots of things that are bad. So yeah, I don't begrudge other sources. That doesn't mean I'm going to necessarily subscribe. But yes, do I find myself reading more Wall Street Journal articles than I do New York Times articles? Yeah, I think that's probably been a trend over time that I would not have predicted 10 years ago.
Well, I know we're skipping around a little bit here, but since we're on the topic, and I want to get to your experience at the E6 Summit, but since we're on the topic, I want to just pull up. There was an article in National Public Radio just a few days ago that you and I were discussing back channel. And for the first time that I can recall in a long time, maybe ever, NPR aired content that raised the notion that nicotine vaping can help people quit cigarettes and is vastly safer than combustible tobacco. Here's the lead from their article: to vape or not to vape. Ha ha ha! The Shakespeare reference. And they point out, the article. Let me just hasten to add, the article does quote some of our friends. Where are they?
Well, Cummings
and Derek Yock.
And Derek Yock.
Yes, they were quoted in the article sticking up for nicotine vaping as a smoking cessation aid and vastly safer, and talked about how they themselves had been, exiled from the academic intellectual community for simply articulating that. So, on the one hand, you might be tempted to think, okay, well, there's a good thing. NPR's kind of coming toward the light a little bit. But let's notice a couple things here, Joe. Where did this appear? Was it on All Things Considered, their flagship news program? Did it run on any kind of serious NPR show? Oh, no. It ran on the weekend on a program that's called Goats and Soda, their global health and development blog. Listenership, 8 people and, my cat. And what is Goats and Soda? How did that start? How did that show get started? Notice it's bankrolled by the Gates Foundation, which is the top, along with Bloomberg, the very top funder of anti-vaping advocacy worldwide. I mean, it's crazy to me. How is that even possible? It's that's straight up bribery. I'm going to say it. Let's just call it what it is: bribery. And the result is clear in what they report. Here's the acid test. Did they cover it fair? No, they did not. For years, there have been stories warning about the dangers of vapes. Young people are becoming addicted to nicotine. And here they are. The article that they're alluding to, their own article, says here 52 people have died because of lung injuries caused by vaping. False. Intentionally deceitful. And there they are quoting Stan Glantz, of course. So I don't know. I mean, I'll stop my rant there, Joe. I mean,
well, do you want to engage on the recent NPR coverage now, or do you want to?
I guess my question is, and maybe we'll use this as a transition to the E6 summit. What is the sense, yours and your colleagues that were at the E6 summit, about the direction of the press coverage? Dr. Bhattacharya seems pretty cynical about New York Times, for example. You know where I come down on a lot of these people. There's no adjectives or blowtorch is hot enough for me. How do they view it? I mean, some people in our community thought that NPR piece was delightful because it quoted some of our friends. But I don't know. I mean, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the direction of the way the press is covering our issues?
Well, let me do some E6 Summit highlights and then come back to this, because even though there was substantial discussion about the importance of media coverage at the summit, and one of my favorites was Ben Yowden from ASH New Zealand, went through quite a bit of detail about his effort to get some grossly incorrect coverage corrected, including an on-air apology. And he joked that he should have disclosed that, whatever Channel 3 News would have to be listed as ASH's biggest corporate contributor, given the fine that they had to pay to them as a result for what they did. So it does really matter, because they have, even in today's balkanized media environment, they're still important sources and also trendsetters and tone setters for the rest of the media establishment.
Well, that's a good question. Let me just start with that. How many reporters were at that? We know our friend Emma Rumney from Reuters was there, but I saw no story from her. I saw no tweets or coverage from her. Maybe I missed it, but I saw virtually no coverage of the summit.
Yeah, I think that was a disappointment. And time back, I actually had reached out to the senior author on the Goats and Soda piece, which you were referring to, to say, this summit would entail getting up early from, if you're based in DC, it would be a really efficient way to get caught up on these issues. I did not get a response back.
Shaka.
Well, yeah, but this is Jim. Every and I go back to for the appropriate and correct umbrage which you shoveled onto the New York Times. They also ran Maya Salovitz's piece in February, right? The op-ed, which was probably one of the most clear and accurate pieces of communication about this issue anywhere. So if it were simple and easy, you and I would have to move on to other things. But fortunately, we're gonna have to keep working at this. But it's not time to give up.
Sorry, I have some thoughts which I'll say. I'll put a pin in. Go ahead.
So anyway, the E6 Summit, notwithstanding your opening criticism about the lack of visibility and access for the people who weren't in the room or had registered to join online, it was another very strong meeting, very impressive people at the top of their games. When they do become available, I think they do have a Vimeo channel that they'll make stuff available. But it's a fair point, like what might be some greatest hits or highlights. But Leon Shahab from University College London gave the opening keynote, and it was excellent in terms of looking at the whole situation. Where's the science? Where's the conflict? What might be ways to work through it? And I think he distinguished himself in terms of someone who is maybe not all the way to star manning, but was fairly steel manning arguments he was very fairly portraying the array of positions.
Yeah.
Carl Erick's talk about what are the trends that he's seen was also good. Abby Friedman presented some data that she hasn't published or presented yet, but essentially highlighting, and I think I'll get this right, and I don't have the details at hand, but that unfortunately when you have the and I know I'll get some, because what my colleague Ariel, instead of, what was it? She doesn't like unintended consequences, indirect consequences. So indirect consequences of policy that restrict non-combusted nicotine, that we see the substitution back to combusted products, that when you look at the behavior of that, it's higher among lower income groups. And so actually the people who are most negatively impacted are the ones who can least afford that outcome. So yeah, it was that those were, it was just really, it was good to have that. But you're right, if it's not reaching enough of the people who think they already have achieved epistemic closure on these issues, there's no more information that they need to be able to come to their views, then it's not reaching its full potential.
Maybe you and I can find common ground on this, Joe. You were just talking about how you were highlighting this for NPR show and encouraging them to watch it. I reached out to Emma Rumney at Reuters, who did indeed attend, although she didn't write about it.
Not yet. She's not a breaking. She's not always. I wouldn't.
All right, I have a thought on that. Bear with me, but I'm gonna get to the common ground. I'll get to the common ground before
I need to brace myself.
I need to brace myself. Cocktail. The common ground is venues like E6 Summit and the other similar conferences that take place could package the highlights very simply in real time, capture the last 45 seconds or minute, and create a highlight package that could go to all reporters on this beat with the names, titles, and contact information for all these individuals. I mean, I've got a wing gal I drink cocktails with in New York City. She wears glasses with a camera in it, Joe. Okay, and it streams to her phone. And so on her social media, if something amusing or interesting or funny happens, she pushes a button on her phone and it captures the last 90 seconds of what she saw, and it goes right on her social media immediately as a highlight. Okay, so the point I'm making is not hard, not difficult, logistically very straightforward. And it would serve the purpose of trying to, get journalists, people that are naturally claim they're interested in this topic, to be aware of it. So I don't know, lots of, here's hoping that, and my shop stands, I stand ready to help. I will gladly hype that stuff.
Yep.
Hells, we look forward and do it on our own initiative when we have a chance. But for the, to back to your other point, if I may.
Yep.
I've got the strong impression that what's happening in the press is what in journalism term of art they call a rowback. And this is when a news outlet has been covering a particular topic for an extended period. And it turns out that they were wrong or mistaken or in error about some fundamental aspects or the whole shooting match. And then they do a story, which is called the rowback, in which they reframe it and talk about it in a more accurate way. And typically they don't acknowledge all the mistakes they made in the past, because that would require, humility and a mea culpa. So they don't do that part. And that, I think, is what's happening here. The body of evidence and the consensus in the academic and research space is so irrefutable at this point on the core elements that the press can no longer, push the alarmism as they once did, so brazenly and without restraint and with total impunity. They know at this point their own credibility is going to suffer if they do that. And so they're putting down markers like the New York Times piece you mentioned, the one lone column in the tree in the vast forest of misinfo they've put out, or NPR's little piece on the, rando marginal goats and soda show, so that they can say, oh, behold, we acknowledge that THR exists, don't you know? We're not complete liars. Here's the one thing we did. And they're also ghettoizing it. They're not putting it in the mainstream part of the main part of their platforms or giving it the attention and gravity it deserves. Rather, they're putting it in this little ghetto of the op-ed page of a contributed essay or the Goats and Soda program. And so it's a kind of evasion and a kind of strategic retreat. I mean, in rhetoric, you would call this a Mott and Bailey argument, where they make the maximal argument, and then when they're challenged on it, they go back to their little fort and they say, oh, no, we did cover it. Look here, behold. So I really worry about that, because for some people in the THR world, they're buying into it. They think, oh, that's great. They use the acronym THR. Hooray.
Well, so obviously your prediction could be accurate and is probably likely so. It would also be likely the exact same phenomena if they had a change of heart, an opening of curiosity and wondering. Now, yes, at some point there should be, if they are earnest and care about regaining trust, that they would say, look, we got ourselves in a uncomfortable spot. We went back to so many of the same sources. There was no viewpoint diversity. I mean, that was really what made the Goats and Soda piece so remarkable, is they actually did talk to people who had different views other than the kind of mainstream standard tobacco control posture on this stuff. So I would, to the extent we have any chance to influence that, I think it's better to say it's delightful to see your curiosity in this issue, because it's actually there's conflict, there's tension here. It's actually very interesting to your readers. You just haven't covered the actual story.
You're mistaking their curiosity for cynical manipulation. They're not really curious. They're putting that marker down as a CYA maneuver, Joe. And that's why they didn't respond to you. They don't actually care. They're not genuinely interested.
Well, they could have not responded just because they get lots of pitches that she doesn't know me from Adam. Like there's a lot. I mean, I'm not prepared to necessarily accept that.
Or maybe It's the millions and millions of dollars they're getting from the world's #1 vape hater. I wonder if that played a role. What's the Occam's razor on that choice?
Well, the Occam's razor then is the clearest way, as Mrs. Campbell, my 11th grade English teacher, taught, is show not tell. If they want to show that their reporting is not influenced by their funding, there's no cleaner, more explicit way to do so than to give a fair airing to nicotine without smoke.
Well, I've got an
You're not offering to hold your breath, are you?
Well, I'll try. Let me try to help. I'll offer a source that would gladly go on the air, I expect, with them. And this really jumped out at me. This is a tweet that got a lot of attention in THR Twitter in the last week. And I'm going to play the video. It's a short video. I'm going to play a little bit of it, and then we'll talk about why it's so important and why it gets so much attention.
Hi everyone, my name is Shane, and as of September 14th this year, I have been now 11 years smoke-free thanks to vaping, traditional products, and flavored nicotine. So I was a pack and a half a day smoker for 16 years, and I was able to quit with vaping. My health is better. My blood pressure went back to normal immediately. And during these 11 years, I've only felt my health improve. Vaping saves lives. The problem we're experiencing right now is government taxes, tariffs, vape shops closing down due to high tobacco price increase, tax increase. My local shop is closing down that I've been going to for many years. So that's what's going on.
Okay, here's why that resonated. This is an ordinary guy in middle America in his car in the parking lot talking about the single most important aspects of the #1 public health issue in America. Okay, he's not on NPR. He's not in the bright lit studios of CBS News. New York Times has never once quoted anyone like him, even though there's 20 million Americans just like that guy. He's talking about national public policy. He's talking about federal law enforcement. It's got huge relevance and newsworthiness. And yet the only way that is getting out, that those voices are getting out, are from a guy with a handheld camera in his car in a strip mall in Des Moines. And so it just illustrates how much this issue is being suffocated. And I'm sure you can sense my frustration and outrage, not least because when you read the bios or the show descriptions of the ones we've been talking about, like the top nicotine writer at the New York Times, Christina Jewett, if you actually read her bio on the New York Times, or you read what Goats and Soda has to say about itself, all they talk about is patting themselves on the back about how they want to get voices of ordinary people, how federal policy affects regular Americans, don't you know? Oh, we want to help marginalized communities, Joe. They love to sing Hosanna about how much they care about the little guy, and it's complete bunk because they never, ever, ever have people like that, featured, even though they are the centerpiece bullseye of the most important issue that's happening in public health.
Well, we can help bring them to deliver both better coverage, to lead to better understanding among the public, and ideally then better policy that helps more people. That's what I'm going to cling to, like Jack on the Titanic and that floating door.
Well, how about this? Let's try to find common ground again. At the same time that you are trying to bring the FDA and NPR and others toward the light, could you also take part, or at least tacitly approve of, the vision that I see for change here, which is a grassroots movement that makes THR a human right and civil disobedience, and something that we're going to stand tall on no matter what the government does, and galvanize the public in that way, as so many other civil rights issues have been. Despite the fire hoses and billy clubs and handcuffs and taxes and everything else the government tries to bring down, there's lots of other issues that have prevailed in civil rights in that way. You don't have to light the pitchforks with me, but would you approve of that and in tandem with your method?
Well, yes, but I think the civil disobedience notion works better inside outside game work to try to bring the establishment institutions to a deeper and better understanding. So I don't think they're necessarily in conflict with one another. I think it's, how do we change the incentive and cultural, social dynamics to give folks who, and again, these, and this could be my naivete, but I do believe these people want to make the world a better place. They want to contribute. And it's not just their progressive, capital P, desire to impose their will upon the dirty. I think they do believe we can make the world better. The problem is when they lose the epistemic humility and curiosity that allows them to see things that are actually there, even if it doesn't fit conveniently in their story that they already believe.
Well, let me ask you something. We talked about Dr. Bhattacharya earlier. Dr. Bhattacharya and his boss, RFK Jr., the head of Health and Human Services, and indeed the president and the national Republican ticket, came to office in no small part, especially in the public health part of the campaign, in no small part because of white hot antipathy for the kinds of people that you're describing, Francis Collins and Anthony Fauci and the Centers, Rachel Walensky at the Centers for Disease Control, and Dr. Bhattacharya, I hasten to add, at the time before the election, during COVID, he was trying the method you were describing. He tried publishing papers, and he tried calling his friends, and he tried signing on to a petition and raising his voice publicly and sharing his expertise. And where did where that got him? Exiled to the frozen wastelands, denounced. The heads of those agencies tried to ruin his career. And so it was only from that mass grassroots movement, Joe, that I'm describing, that there actually was meaningful change and that there was a shift. It might not, I don't think it's happening the way that a lot of the public health mandarins would like. I mean, that China shop is being pretty badly smashed up, but that's what's going to happen. And you know what? If that's something similar like that happened in nicotine policy, boy, I'd be getting my confetti cannon out. So how about you? Would you like to see a revolutionary change like that in the nicotine space, or a slow realization coming to the light? Which of those would be better?
Well, I don't think those are necessarily mutually exclusive either. I'd love to see a rapid embrace of the continuum of risk as a basis for regulation and policy. But I think we'll be better off having institutions that can help us make sense of evolving science. I mean, there's just too much. The world is too crazy to rely upon our own ability to process all the information.
Well, I mean, the guy in his car in the CVS parking lot seemed to process it just fine to me.
And
he didn't seem to have any difficulty.
No, well, so maybe that's another step on my journey of understanding of I need to accept that a lot of this stuff is not that fancy pants and can be understood by the public. I think that is one lesson of trying to dumb down science and health information doesn't seem to work particularly well. and has long-term consequences of eroding trust.
Yeah, I mean, it springs to mind for me the two big, I don't know, kind of milestones that we've been waiting for this long time. One is, when is the FDA going to finally shoot straight with the public in a coherent way? They've already poured, what was it, at least $7+ million to Johns Hopkins, wholly captured institution of Michael Bloomberg, world's #1 vape hater, to try to devise a way to do that. God in heaven knows where that actually stands. I kind of hope the Doge guys wrecked it, to be honest. But there's also the question of, when are they going to approve more products? And we've got 29.
Authorized.
We've got
yeah,
we've got 20 days left in our bet, Joe, about whether FDA is going to authorize more products by the end of the year. What's your forecast on both those questions? When are they going to shoot straight, and when's the next authorization coming? Just in your guesstimate.
Okay, so back to an earlier conference this fall at the Food and Drug Law Institute's Tobacco Nicotine Conference. Acting Center for Tobacco Products Director Brett Koplow gave moving remarks, including saying, you're going to hear a lot more from us about the continuum of risk.
I'm so touched. I'm so touched. God bless that man. Give me a break. Moving. Yeah, it was moving. All right. Well, move to the bathroom. All right. So in light of that, in light of those sincere, heartfelt remarks, your forecast.
I'm still, I continue to squirrel resources away to be able to to make good on our wager. But I'm clinging to the optimism that is our that the science is mounted. I mean, I have to believe there are going to be more pouch authorizations. I don't know that there'll be more vape authorizations, but I think there will be more pouch authorizations.
You know what's crazy to me about that is that, tell me if I'm mistaken. You're a lot closer to the research on this than I am, but the pouches of all the different independent makers and the large manufacturers, this is not a complex technology. These are all fundamentally the same kind. I mean, it's an outer container with nicotine powder in it. This is not a transorbital rocket. It's got like 3 elements in it, and they're all fundamentally the same. So please help me understand why that's such a high hurdle for them to clear.
Well, so I go back to my point about the deep, widespread, bipartisan understanding that nicotine is the underlying problem. And the folks, the scientists, the medical reviewers, the chemists, all that sort of stuff, they're operating in an environment where the food chain above them all understands things that way. So I actually, well, that's our world.
But that's not FDA. When they testify in front of Congress, they insist that they're not impacted by politics.
So, and this is a deep thing. I've not studied the history of this, but I think FDA is frequently walking a very delicate line where they have to represent that they follow their statutory authorities and the available evidence to deliver the best outcomes for the public health. The reality is, however, they are a agency within the Department of Health and Human Services, and there is political leadership that is picked by the president. So policy positions are influenced by that way. So I might wish it were other than that. And I know quite a bit of.
You're there, Joe. You're on the verge. You wish it were other than that. I've got a seat for you on the libertarian wing. It's a nice first class seat. Save this for you. You can stop it there. I wish it were otherwise. We can get there. Join us. We'll make it otherwise.
Okay, it's a warm invitation. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh no. Did we just lose Jim? Is it just me? This is scary.
Sorry, I deleted myself for a brief reason.
Yeah, Jim, you would, if I would have had better situational awareness, I could have made real hay with that.
I'm not going to tell you where that button is. I was just trying to see if there's anything else I was gonna pull up for today. Well, I'll tell you what. Why don't we end with a little piece of good news that has FDA valence, although not in the nicotine space. I mentioned this to you back channel in direct message. We'll put this link in the thread, but very, very dear, close friend of mine who I've known since I was 18 years old, and mom of 4 in Chicago, Illinois, was diagnosed several years ago with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, which is a terrible affliction and is fatal in all cases. And the researchers have been struggling for years to try to find therapies and a cure. In fact, FDA has 2 approved medications, but by most estimates, those medications only forestall the decline by about 2 months on average. So in other words, they don't do a whole lot more than a Tic Tac would. But there's a new kind of therapy that a doctor named Abreu has been trying based on a 100-year-old Nobel Prize winning method where you induce a fever in the brain and then can help specific nerve pathways regenerate. I'll put the paper in the link so people can dive deep if they wish. But the point is, I saw her in April at my daughter's first communion. She could barely walk, couldn't speak at all, really, really tough shape. And over the summer, she did this experimental therapy. She was the first patient that he did it with. And the results were nothing short of miraculous. They put a press release out last Friday announcing that for the first time in the medical literature, a person has been cured. I repeat, cured of ALS. And they're going to start clinical trials in January. And he's already begun treating some other patients with this method. They too, I looked at some of the texts last night from some of the other patients that he has been treating, and it just brought tears to my eyes. Joe, when I saw her, she couldn't walk up a single step. She had a walker and had to have someone assist her just to get across the room at like barely moving. She's now swimming, playing golf, playing pickleball. Her speech is returning. She feels much, much better. And again, the regular, her treating physicians in Chicago, not the therapy physicians, her regular docs are the ones that measure all the benchmarks. And they contributed to the paper and said, like, from our vantage, we don't have a dog in the fight, but from our vantage, all of the measures we use to assess her ALS are gone. Really incredible. And proof, I'd say, too, about like medical innovation. Let's not lose sight of people that are trying new and innovative and different things. Not all wisdom or results or outcomes derive from the high holy church of Silver Spring, Maryland. All right. It's real people doing this in their own ordinary lives. So I wanted to share that because I thought you'd awesome. Hear it.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Jim. And it is, I would echo and endorse your implications from that. It's there's so much creativity out among our fellow humans, and to try to create environments where they can take advantage of that is what we should all be trying to do.
Yeah, there's an interesting kind of press angle, too, that I'll just close on, which is I was expecting that press release to get a ton of ink. I mean, you know, who hasn't seen the Lou Gehrig's giving his farewell talk at Yankee Stadium, and who hasn't known someone in their lives or second or third connection that has suffered from ALS? Every single one of us is susceptible to it and knows just how horrendous it is. And so you'd think, holy Christmas, it's like someone landing on the moon. They cured this disease. You'd think it would have been a pretty splashy story. It got no ink. It got no ink. The doctor, I'm told, is getting a ton of inquiries from patients who are hearing about it in a kind of samizdat word of mouth fashion. But it almost makes me think, and again, you're closer to this than I am, but it almost makes me think like the national press waits until, the the peer-reviewed journal or the priests at FDA have formally blessed it before they even think that it's real. Am I being too conspiratorial?
No, I think that there is, and I think it's probably appropriate that there should be a high threshold for credulity on these sorts of things, especially when it's good news, right? I think there's a big asymmetry about because of our negativity bias that, like, oh, boy, we have to let people know because this seems scary and we would want people to know. That's not at play here. So I think that's part of it as well.
Yeah, as we just pointed out earlier in the show, when faced with reports of people being injured by vaping or being killed by vaping, did NPR tap the brakes or exercise caution or actually look into those cases or try to, get to the bottom of it? Or no, did they splash it out all over Hell's Half Acre with a trumpet and let it lay out there, despite the fact that it was 100% demonstrably false? I mean, that's a real problem, Joe.
It is a real problem. It is a real problem. And people will have to come back in our next episode to hear the answer. Will Batman free himself in time before the laser slices him in half?
Well, maybe I'll get the tiki torches and the pitchforks, and I'll meet you on Connecticut Avenue, and we'll have a little stroll towards Silver Spring.
Okay.
How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Okay, all right. I'll bring the Caterpillar demolition ball. You can take the first swing, Joe. Nothing would make me happier. All right, that's all we've got for today. I think we got holidays coming up, but hopefully we can try to reconnoiter same time next week if you're available.
I may need to shift it a little bit, but I'll follow up with a time because I don't think I can do right at 11:30, but maybe a little before.
All right, we'll keep you posted, listeners, and we'll try to do some more, over throughout during the holidays. There's so much going on in vape policy, but in the meantime, thanks for joining us. It's Jim McCarthy with American Vapor Manufacturers, and thank you, Joe, for your time, insight, and especially your forbearance.
You betcha, Jim. Thank you. Thank you for bringing me on a journey.
All right, thanks, friends. We'll see you next time.
Okay, bye.
Bye.